Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's HJ Goes Live session, which is translating global trends to the salon chair, and it's supported by Wella Professionals. Today, we are joined by the incredible Warren Boodaghian, who is head of technical at Hob. He's going to be really revealing how trends are created, as well as his trend predictions for 2022 and beyond. So it's definitely a must-see session. He'll also be explaining how trends filter down to the mass market and how to translate more of those more out there looks into everyday colours for clients in the salon. As I explained, today's session is supported by Wella Professionals, and Warren teaches the Colour Masterclass at the Wella Studios, which is a one-day course focused on trends and working creatively with colour. And his next date is the 28th of June at the Wella Studio in London. There are still a few places available, and the course costs £300 plus VAT, so you can book, call or email the studio. And we're putting all of the information into the comments during this session. So thank you so much for joining us today, Warren.
You're welcome. That was a really good introduction. Very, very professional.
Oh, thank you
I'll try to live up to it.
Oh, thank you very much. I think we won't tell everyone that we were talking about Zoom backgrounds and surfing style backgrounds before we went live.
Yeah, possibly not.
No,
How are
definitely
you? Okay?
not. I'm very well, thank you, Warren. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Really good.
Brilliant. Well, it's great to have you with us today. And anyone who's tuning in live, you are of course, more than welcome to ask Warren questions while we're chatting away. But should we just maybe kick off, Warren, with you telling us a little bit about your role as head of technical at Hob?
Yeah, amazing. So I've been with Hob. So unfortunately, it was 6 months before COVID hit. So I've obviously not hit the ground running a little bit. But at Hob, I look after the colour department, both in Salon and Academy. So very two different visions under like one umbrella. So obviously education for Academy and also salon support as well for the salon. So looking after our 20+ salon groups, educating as support artists for Wella Professionals, and obviously developing education content for the brand, both for consumer and for the hairdresser as well. So I've been here for about, God, it must be 2 years, but I keep on just saying like 9 months because I've had that like year sabbatical in between.
Yeah,
so
2020 doesn't count,
yeah,
does it?
Doesn't count.
Yeah. Amazing, Warren. And obviously you've got a lot of expertise in the field of trends. Could you maybe tell us about where your expertise in trends originally came from?
Yeah, so I moved to London, it must have been 12 years ago, and I originally started my journey with Hob. So I worked for Hob for about a year. It was when Christelle Lundquist was with the brand. And I think, I kind of fell into the habit of, like, I worked 5 days a week in the salon, but then on my day off, I would go in the academy and support, and kind of like stalk the academy team to try and get in there as quick as possible. I then became like an academy support system for colour. And then I think from there, it was working really closely with the team that I think I kind of realised how you can incorporate fashion, lifestyle, like architecture, all into hair, and how you communicate it and articulate it. From there, I was really fortunate and was headhunted to go and work for TG Professional, so with Anthony Mascolo at Bedhead. And they're obviously acquired by like Unilever, so they're a big, massive corporation. And from there, that's how I fell into like trends. So I used to shadow and support the trend development agency that worked with Unilever to help TG come up with global hair trends. So I started with that about maybe 8-9 years ago. And that's how I kind of fell into trend development. And then I became a kind of like jack of all trades and at TG, and was educating, doing the shoots and the shows, and then also developing trend content for the brand globally. So I kind of think that's where my love kind of for trends came in, was basically from when I first started at Hob, and then like translating over to TG. And I always say I'm very fortunate that I've worked with some of the industry's best. I've worked with, I'm now obviously working again with Akin Knizi. Christelle Lundquist is, I'm very fortunate to call her a friend, but like she's, an absolute inspiration and an icon in the industry. And then Anthony Mascolo, and the way he talks about hair is incredible. And the fact that, he started his own brand within Fringe now as well. Like, he's 60+ and he's a constant inspiration to me. So I think working with these people kind of helped me to kind of like gravitate to that part of my role.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for explaining that, Warren. And for anyone tuning in, I'm sure you can understand that Warren is 100% a trends expert, and he really does know his stuff when hearing all about his background. And for anyone tuning in as well, Warren, I guess most people in the salon see a trend once it's arrived.
Mhm.
Do you have any insights into how color trends in particular, how they're actually made? Where do they start from?
Yeah, so for instance, you have agencies like InTrend, WGSN, and we had an independent agency at Unilever that will come and talk to us about trends. For instance, we're in 2021 now, and they would be developing trends like 6 or 7 years in advance. So for
Wow.
instance, yeah, so it's like when they're talking about certain trends, they sound very far-fetched, but then
Mm,
you think back and you think, God, like how it built this down so quick.
mm,
I think the one thing that for me always translates is that a trend, especially with fashion, just isn't to do with clothes or with hair or with makeup. You've got to think about the economic climate. You have to think about, the world that we live in right now. It just doesn't like hair trends don't just translate into, a client in the chair and you talking about like a brand new red that would have been developed 6 years ago, and the way that you articulate it and communicate it would have kind of been not predicted for you to say, but it's really interesting. I find it fascinating that I remember a meeting 6 years ago about trends, and they were talking about like injections of like vitamins and these oxygen masks that you would see, and I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. And then I was in America and then Asia last year with work, or the year before, and you had people sitting in this like cafe, but it wasn't a cafe, it was like somewhere where you go and you have oxygen pumped into your system, yeah,
wow.
to make you feel more like alive, I suppose.
I
it was
bet.
so alien like six
Yeah.
years ago, and then to see it a year and a half ago is incredible. But yeah, it is amazing. I do love that part of like research.
Definitely. It reminds me of the like the oxygen they pump into like the casinos in Vegas that kind of keeps you
That's
awake,
probably
day
where
and
they got
night.
the idea from.
100%. And that begs the question, Warren. So who decides the trends?
So I think, what, with trends, I think they are very much led by what's going on within the world. So I think, if you look back and, I'm a firm believer, I'm 37, but I always look back at past decades, and you look at the 20s where we had the Great Depression, you look at, the post-war movement, you look at the 60s where you had, the kind of birth of like women's lib, the right to vote, gay rights, everything like this. So I think for me, trends are a kind of a political movement of what you see happening. The 80s for me is a massive one. I was a child of the 80s, and you think back to like, the Tory government, and up north, there was like, millions of people unemployed. And you saw the birth of like new trends, like the new romantics. And I think, we've had a really well, I shouldn't swear, but we've had a really bad year, the past year and a half. Um, and I really think that from that, it's always like a rebirth in terms of like trends and how people express themselves. And I think, with the Gen Z kind of like era or kids, they're reimagining and kind of reinterpreting like trends that we've seen like many years ago. So I think for me, like where trends and how they're formulated, it's very much about what's going on globally within the world. So, obviously at the
Mm,
moment, the way that things are, the only way to express ourselves is our hair. At the moment, we're all living behind a mask. So, I find now when I leave the house, especially, I'm dressing up more because my face is covered. And I think that,
mm.
we've had a year in, so let's all celebrate and let's, look a bit different and,
That's a really good point, Warren, because I guess you can express yourself through your clothes and also through your hair when your
yeah.
face is covered up.
Exactly, and I think that's maybe where I think that question to where I was leading with that with trend is 100%. It's kind of what's going on globally within the world. Like,
Mm,
they predicted, for instance, in the 2000s, the economic crash with the Icelandic banks, and that was the birth of the root stretch again. So, it was
mm,
really grungy and punk. So you had like Drew Barrymore, Alexa Chung. It was very like dip dye, so dark and really blonde.
mm,
As obviously life evolved and then we all kind of got out of the cycle of the economic crash, that was when the birth of balayage came back, and it was more high maintenance. It
mm.
was still a root stretch, but it was a bit more opulent and expensive. So it's trends are always cycling. And I think for me, you have big trends. So normally you have 4 key trends in a year. And then what you have is you have like micro trends that you'll kind of see for maybe 4 weeks, like a flash trend, and then it will go away and then something else will take its place as well. So I think that's always really key to talk about, is you'll have 4 key trends and then mini trends that kind of like translate to them as well.
Amazing. We've had Tony Puccio is tuning in, and he said trends come and go, but style stays forever, which I think is a great comment there, isn't it, Warren?
100%. I always talk about, trends, but I think, classic never dates. And I think, 80% of what I do in the salon chair are classic clients. I work in Camden and my clients are still very classic. But I can still talk about each individual trend to that client, and I can make it fit for them, but talk about it and communicate it in a very different way. But no, that's a really great comment. Really great comment.
Definitely. We've also got Suana tuning in from Bangkok in Thailand. So we've got a global international audience today. So thank you so much for letting us know, Suana, that you're tuning in from Thailand today. And Warren, in terms of trends as well, obviously you are an expert in your field and you know where to go to get ahead of the trends. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But before we do you have any advice or tips for a hairdresser or anyone tuning in who wants to be that one step ahead, and where they can go to get the inspiration for the upcoming trends so that they know what their clients are going to be asking for? Do you have any sort of go-to Instagram accounts or websites?
Yeah.
Or
you know what, for me, I think Instagram's a really good portal for like quick inspiration, but I think for me, I'm very much driven by what we see culturally. So like what we see in terms of like movies that are coming out, like documentaries, like when you look at galleries and kind of what's on it, within the art scene. For me, kind of that's what I get driven by to create these trends. Even if they're just commercial ones. I mean, Instagram is brilliant. Like, Google, like, you can go onto like Vogue, Pantone, WGSN, to look at instant trends. But I think just look at what's happening around you. And even like, I'm originally from Liverpool. I'm like, I'm not saying that you have to look at galleries in London. You could look at an exhibition that's happening in the Tate in Liverpool and see what's happening. I think at the moment they've got an exhibition of Linda McCartney, and it's all her pictures of like, the Beatles and like the kind of 50s, 60s and the 70s. And, I'm definitely going to say it the next time I go home. And I think for me, that will definitely, give me a buzz to create some trends to do kind of like the psychedelic era, and the Beatles were kind of, on that kind of like trip and stuff like that. But I think for me, I kind of steer away from social media for inspiration. I love it in some ways, but in other ways, I think when you want to think about trends or communicate a trend to a client, for me, I kind of steer clear of social media, unless it's a client who's driven by a celebrity, which is very different. So, you can get a client sat in the chair and, automatically, they're driven by social media. They always go to the new hip place to go on a night out. They'll bring a picture of like Kylie or like, Kendall Jenner. For them, obviously, they're driven by social media and kind of, celebrity influence. But for me, I try to steer clear away of that as much as possible if I can.
That's a really great, and that's a great point, Warren, isn't it? About just opening your eyes of what's going on around you beyond social media, and seeing what kind of, like you say, exhibitions, art galleries, kind of.
We spend so much time on our phones, like, whether it's you're single and you're on Tinder and all this kind of stuff, and, you're on Instagram and you're texting friends. I try in my own downtime to really try and stay away from my phone. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with my phone.
Love that, Warren. And we've Lynn Webster is also tuning in. She says it's lovely to see Warren again, a fabulous colorist and a master of his art. So lovely.
I remember. Yeah, I know Lynn very well. Yeah. Thank you.
A lovely compliment there from Lynn for you, Warren. And we have been talking about where to get inspiration from and where to go to find trends. But I think you're going to make life a lot easier for everyone in a second, aren't you, Warren? Because you're going to tell us about the upcoming trends.
For
2022 and beyond. Which you're doing all the hard work for everybody. So this is fantastic. So Warren, do you want to just maybe give us a bit of an inside scoop on what the upcoming trends are going to be?
I'll share my screen with you now, and then we'll go through that. I'll give a bit of a briefer introduction to these trends. Let me just
perfect.
Here we go. Let me see if I can do this. Fab. Cool. Can you see that as well, Laura?
Yeah, I can see that as well.
Great. So I've been quite Gen Z. Instead of writing live for now, I've done L4N. So
So live for now, that's what that stands for.
live
Brilliant.
for now, yeah,
Live for now.
L4N. So yeah, I'm trying to be like a Gen Z with my terminology.
Love it.
So I think, for me, and I think for all of us, we've had like we keep on saying this year and a half of being in and being isolated and being away from like loved ones. And I think, as humans, and especially, myself, I love my own downtime, but it's really made me realize how much, I just want to be out and be with friends. And, it's not a case of going on a night out. It can be anything. And I think, developing these trends and these movements for 2021, 2022, it's all about the beginning of all kinds. So it's about, you can still have your classic DNA kind of, style that you have, but you can add stuff to your own personality through fashion, through hair. It's all about an awakening and about energy and hope. And I think, these are really key words that we need to look for. My first couple of weeks in the salon was fantastic because I had clients that have had the same color, who have followed me from TG for 10 years. They had 4 months worth of regrowth and they were just like desperate for anything. And it was great because even if it was a change of hue, slightly darker, slightly lighter, a different technique, a lot of my clients are really open. And it made me realize that maybe I was a little bit stuck in my own rut with certain clients, and that, we just shouldn't offer something new to that new client or someone seeking something. So it's all about giving the client new energy when they're sat in the chair.
So it's like a new beginning, like a fresh start.
Yeah,
that kind of, yeah.
100%. It's urgent to like live again. And we were talking before this, saying like don't live behind your mask. Like, I think, unfortunately, the masks are going to be around a little bit longer than what we all want. And I think the only way now to communicate how we feel and express ourselves is through our hair, and it is through how we dress as well. Unfortunately for makeup, I think it's all about the eyes at the moment, when you're wearing your mask. Yeah, but it's about, don't let the mask like take control of your life. I think a lot of us, and I've got mine here, you put it on and automatically you just feel like really down about yourself. And I think it's about forgetting about that and then, living for now and moving forward. So 4 key trends or movements we're going to talk about is sheer fantasy, root attitude, color therapy, and I think my personal favorite is like dance floor diva.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite, which I shouldn't say, but these are 4 that we've created here at Hob. So if we look at the first one, this is sheer fantasy. So this one is super feminine. It's really seductive and the color is really luminous. So sheer fantasy is a play on words for the nude illusion. So what you find with hair color is that, especially when you do a blonde, is that when you tone it, sometimes the client feels a little bit dark because of the toner you've used. So here now, it's about leaving that element of lightness. So you would still obviously tone over a pre-lightener or over highlights, or whether you're working with brunettes, coppers or reds, but it's about working with a slightly lighter level. So here what you're doing is you're working with the same tone, but you're changing the level to create the sheer effect. So depending on the texture of the hair, the density of the hair or the haircut, you would work with, for instance, let's say, like a mocha brunette in terms of the actual tonality, but what would change is the level around the haircut. So we can use the model here from Balmain as an example, the curly haired model. There she has the same kind of tonality from the roots to the ends, but what changes is the level to give it that sheer effect. So that's what you want to create through this, is having more luminous, seductive, super feminine hair. So techniques is all about precision lightening with tonal placements as well, and multi-layering effects. So if you're working with balayages, to get your client to have something different done with a balayage, you can create a different toning technique where you work with sections of the hair that are slightly richer in tone to create that kind of like sheer fantasy look. So this is the first one. The next one we'll look at is root attitude. This is a really cool one. So this one is a blend between 60s Warhol and meets 80s American rock and roll. So if you research like rock and roll, it changes depending on what country you're looking at and what region you're looking at. So rock and roll was very different in England than it was in America. In America, it was a little bit more, I would say, not as androgynous, a little bit sexier. You think of like Blondie, like Joan Jett. It still had a very masculine feel to it, but it was a little bit more, I would say, sexy, where with British kind of like rock and roll, it was definitely more androgynous. Here you've got a mixture of 60s meets 80s, which are my two favorite decades to reference for trends. 60s Warhol, so Andy Warhol, a really famous artist, and he's like a movie collaborator as well. So here it's about fusing the two together. So Root Attitude kind of plays by their own rules. It's like really dirty, lived in color. So organic, natural roots with flashes of color. So here we mentioned before about Gen Z. So Gen Z's reimagining trends, or they're creating a new interpretation. I think what's really important is every trend we communicate, the inspiration always comes from a past decade. It will never come really from something from the future. You'll have references of future or futurism, but for me, with trends, when you're researching and you go back, it's really important to remember not to copy a trend, but to upcycle it, or like recycle the trend. So here it's about natural, organic looking roots. The root smudges, instead of it being quite soft through the length and ends, will be like neon, overly saturated, very synthetic. So you're working more with color pops. The blondes will be really white, but heavier in tone. So Blondie or Debbie Harry is an amazing interpretation for this. So like a really kind of like grayish vanilla blonde, but in certain areas of the hair, she like toned it down with like dirtier grays, like, you know, really intense, like ink blacks through the underneath. So here it's about giving it kind of that lived in, like sexy feel with this one. So this is a great one. And I think, you know, a way to communicate this to a commercial color client. So we've spoke about, let's say, a blonde, which is super white with, let's say, ink black through the underneath. To a classic color client, you can still talk about this trend, but you can change it slightly. So for me, if I had a client that's a little bit more commercial and didn't want to go the whole hog with this trend, I would talk to her and say, you know, we've had a few trends that we've looked at. There's one called Root Attitude, and what's great about this is it's about an overall blonde color, but you're working with highs and lows of different tones. So overall, you're still going to look the same, but what we're going to create is more texture, but we're going to create texture through hair color, which is a great thing to say to a client, because at the moment, texture is everywhere within hair. Sleek and straight is kind of moving away a little bit, and it's to do with texture. And as a colorist, you would normally always really rely on the stylist to create that. But as a colorist, we can create texture through hair color. We can add dimension. And this is something you can talk about in this trend to translate it to a more classic color client.
That's really interesting, Warren, isn't it?
Yeah, the next one's color therapy. So this is kind of like techno meets comic book. So this is forget light therapy. So during the year and a half I had off, I got myself one of those LED masks.
Brilliant.
Treated it like a year and a half in the Caribbean, which it wasn't, unfortunately. So this is all about forgetting light therapy. And this season, so moving into winter, the only therapy you're going to need is color. So you need to go out with a bang, dare to be seen. So this one is a great one for, like, I would say Gen Z, but then also I've got a client who's 75 who comes to Camden, and her hair is like an aubergine, and like an aubergine color, not like her hair's an aubergine, hair color. And she sat in the chair, she wanted something different done, and she was like, I'm sick of wearing my mask, I want to be seen. And, you know, she reminds me a little bit of like Sandra Rhodes. She's like really cool. And we took it from that kind of deep kind of black grape, and we took it to like a really bright fuchsia, like neon purple, and she loved it. Like, she absolutely loved it. And I think here, color is the best way to make you feel better. You know, the one thing that I'm looking forward to is, and I was actually in Brighton yesterday for work, And it was really sunny. I went to the sea, and because the sun was out, it was just like really like turquoise, and it was the best thing, not only for my soul but for my eyes to look at, because it was just so beautiful. And I think that we tend to forget that color is individual to everyone, so everyone's eyes sees color completely differently, which I think is really unique. So this trend is all about daring to be seen. And in the winter, this is a great one, because when we've got like our overcoats on, we're all wrapped up, the one thing that people look at first is the face and the hair. So this one is about really, bright color. The techniques is like global, roots to ends, impactful color. So for me, when we talk about techniques, the one thing that I find is the most hardest thing for a colorist is to create a color that's even from the roots to the ends and is really bright in saturation and not too dense. So this is technically the most simplistic of all the trends and the techniques we're talking about, but probably the hardest for someone to achieve, because it's technically no room for error. It's a bit like when you're cutting a bob.
So we'll talk a little about your colour masterclass, won't we, at Wella Professionals Studio, Warren? But I guess your colour masterclass would come in useful for creating a trend like the colour therapy trend.
Yeah, 100%. And like these two images are from Kenzo Moschino for the winter 2021-2022. So the inspiration comes from like techno and comic book superheroes. So if you think of like comic book superheroes, especially American ones, when you look at the pictures, they're all very vivid in colour, very bright. And I was a little bit too young for the techno era, but techno was all about like strobe lighting. It was like all to do with like helter skelter music, like all this techno house, all like the strobe. So it's a kind of blend of the two, so really like eccentric and eclectic, with kind of like a high fashion feel as well.
Definitely. And actually, Warren, I was just thinking while you were talking through the colour therapy trend that they often talk about recessions and periods of challenge, in the world, when you go through a period of challenging times, that there's like a lipstick effect where people would kind of purchase more lipsticks and want to brighten up their 100%. Face with colour on their lips. But obviously with the face mask, they can't do that. So having this colour therapy trend where you can, bring that joy back to yourself through colour. That's ideal, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people many years ago never used to like bright, vivid colours, especially classic colour clients. I think now, the comment before about style and classic, you see people. I forget her name. She's she's part of the royal family. She's a socialite, and she's got bright pink hair. I'll have to try and find her name in a bit. And now colour can be anything. You can go into an office, you can go into a workspace, and anyone can have any hair color now within reason. But many years ago that was never the case. It was like it had to be like downplayed, and we were talking before about age. Like age isn't even a number anymore.
No.
Like when I was training like 20 years ago, you were always told that take into consideration the client's age. That doesn't matter anymore. You can be 85 and have bright green hair and you can look amazing, and 100%. You could be 16 and have bright green hair and not pull it off. Like age for me is irrelevant. Like it's all about the person sat in the chair, whether they're an introvert or an extrovert. It doesn't matter. It's how they want to be seen. And at the moment, with how the world has changed and how it's evolving, we need to evolve ourselves as well. And we need to stay in tune with that, because it's the one thing as a hairdresser, when you get stale, clients do move somewhere else. And I think it's always really important to give each client, whether they're new or old, the same level of consultation and to talk about trends. You might get a client who never changes, but still communicate it.
Definitely, Warren. And is it still important? Is suitability still important in terms of kind of whether your skin tone would work with a certain shade of colour or things like that?
With some clients, 100%. So we speak about, and obviously at Hob we have our own colour consultation, which we call the Couture Colour Match, and it's very much suited to suitability of complexion, the eye colour, the lifestyle of the client, and you would definitely very much factor that into your consultation and to communicating trends. But sometimes you'll get a client and they'll just suit anything. And I'm just at the top of my head, like for instance, like Miley Cyrus, she's a great one because she constantly evolves and changes her look. I said I hate talking about celebrities, but like Lady Gaga, for instance, like she can have any hair color. It's how she wears it. And I think as long as you wear something with confidence, like they were all taking the pee out of me before because I've got a leather waistcoat on. I don't care. I'm like, I like my leather waistcoat. I'll probably hate it. I'll probably hate it in 6 months, but have some fun. Like, you know.
Exactly. You're looking great today, Warren, I have to say.
I'll probably regret it in 6 months, but you know, today it's okay.
That's what trends are all about, though, aren't they?
They are. And then I think this is my favorite one. So for anyone who's been watching Netflix, you know, a series called Halston,
yes,
with Ewan McGregor. What I would say, and I'm obviously not promoting like, you know, sites, but there's a documentary about Halston on Amazon. I would strongly recommend anyone to watch that. Like, Halston was a pioneer for fashion, and now when you look at, so for instance, when you look at fashion now, high-end fashion houses, so Versace, you know, you've had Maison Margiela, all collaborating with the likes of like H&M, you know, Topshop. Celebrities do this collaboration now, you know, Ivy Park with Topshop. Halston was the first person within major fashion to collaborate with a high street brand, which is called JCPenney. Unfortunately, it didn't go down well back in the 70s. I think a lot of people preferred high street to be high street and high end to be high end. But he was a pioneer for that and a revolutionary of what he done. He even made carpets, and he's a fashion designer.
Wow, so he was ahead of his time.
Ahead of his time. For me, what I loved about him, and I think my favorite decade, if I could go back in a time machine anywhere, it would be to like the late 70s when Studio 54 was open. You know, Halston created this kind of buzz of what you refer to as Halstonettes. So wherever he went, this fashion designer, he had hordes of women with him, all dressed in kind of like these like chiffon outfits. You know, we had the kimono style dresses and the maxi dresses. He just dressed women like so beautifully and so sexy and flirty. And this is kind of what this trend is all about. It's about being nostalgic to the dance floor. Like, you know, when we've all had a few drinks and we're on the dance floor, we all feel flirty, we all feel like party centric, and we want to be seen, and we love that spotlight for however long we're on it. And this is what this is all about. It's like we've been in for so long, but now it's about just looking good. And this one's all about sexy hair, expensive, really flirty, really fun. Blondes are very metallic, so the way to create like a metallic on a blonde is to create more like a pastel hue with it as well. Brunettes, reds and coppers are packed with richness. So techniques that you'd see is something that we do at Hob, which is called chromalites, which is great to create like the Californian blonde. So it highlights all the hair around the face and internally as well, but leaves you a bit softer around the hair, around the exterior of the hair. Chiaroscuro is another trend that we've created at Hob, where again, it's the same color from the roots to the ends, but what changes is the light reflex, so the tones change internally within the hair. So it's all about super feminine, super playful hair, metallics, like pastel hues. This one is just all about having fun. And with this one as well, for a client that's maybe a little bit more commercial, so a little bit like yourself, Laura, you know, you've got a bit of blonde through the length and ends, you go on a night out on a Saturday night and you might want to go for a bit of a rosé toner, but you don't want something permanent. You can tell your client to come in for a blow dry, and what you can do is work with like a hair conditioning mask, or even like pure tone with warm water, and just pour it onto the hair and dry it in, and it'll last a few shampoos. So there's simple things that you can do to create this trend, but make it more commercial to clients that maybe don't want to go for a full change.
That's a great tip, Warren. So for somebody who wants the vibe of that previous colour therapy, going for it with colour, this is kind of like a toned down version that you could maybe take from day to night, or
exactly. And the same with that colour therapy, the trend before, that you can do that still with clients that want a bit of a change, create something with a semi-permanent mixed with conditioner, give it a little bit of a change, but something that isn't so permanent. And the next time they come in, they might want to go for it, or they might be happy with staying what you've done. But I think these, for me, they're really the big four movements, what we'll see. So we've got one which is a bit more like androgynous and a bit more like rock and roll. We've got more of the neon brights, you know, more for like maybe like Gen Z, but you can still incorporate it to, you know, any client. Dance floor diva, super sexy, super feminine, really flirty, and then sheer fantasy, which is probably more like your high maintenance haute couture client. So your clients that come in probably every 6 to 8 weeks for their hair, they would very much fit into that one because it's a much more expensive, high maintenance feel trend.
Amazing. Oh, that's fascinating stuff, Warren. I'm sure everyone tuning in is going to be taking loads of notes there for how to tap into those trends moving forward. And do you have any advice or tips for anyone who wants to try and start transitioning their clients into wanting to tap into these trends?
I think it's, you know what, it's all about communication. Sometimes what's easier is kind of like a little bit of like, I call it like bird food. So you would like, you know, talk to the client, maybe they're having their normal service. So I've got a client who's having full head highlights. And what I might do is just say, oh, you know, I've just been on this call and I've seen these 4 trends. There's something called like sheer fantasy. And I think what would be great is when we tone your hair, if we do something a little bit different. So we'll still work with you being a blonde, but what we might do is create something a little bit more like wheatier through the underneath, and then through the top, keep it more that biscuit blonde that we like to see, and kind of like feed it to her in that way. And then if she's game for it, then you can do it. And then what I always tend to do with clients and even models in the academy is when I've done someone's hair and I go over to the stylist to check it, even if they're 100% happy, I would then say, you know what, I love it. And if we do the same next time, great. But I think where we could take it next time is X, Y, and Z, and maybe give them food for thought for the next time as well. So I think that gives the client the feeling that, you know, even if they don't want to change, that you're thinking about them and you're thinking about their next service and what they need and what they require. Because we all love that service, no matter where we go. Like, you know, I go somewhere for breakfast very much near where I live, and they remember that, you know, I don't like dairy, and every time I go in, they make sure they give me the coconut yogurt, and they're really like, they're super friendly. The food's okay, but the service is incredible. So that's kind of why I always go back, because it's that constant reminder that they remember who I am and what I like.
Definitely. When you're half asleep, then they sort of sort your order out for you. That's always pretty good as well. Do you have any advice as well, Warren, for anyone who's tuning in who might be kind of feeling like they're a bit stuck in a rut with colour?
So I think with that, it's all about education and feeling inspired. You know, whether you get that from your salon and from your team members. You know, I always think have a creative jam session. We're really lucky, obviously, being part of the academy, that, you know, we always get together and we have a coffee meeting of a morning, and we, you know, talk about things that we've seen or we've watched or what we've seen, you know, on social media with some of the guys, or if we've been to a gallery or whatever. I think for a salon, that's a great thing to do. Constant education, you know, I know obviously, you know, HJ, you guys are incredible in terms of, you know, how much education you put online, on lives. The same with Wella Professional. I think, you know, as a hairdresser, you never stop learning. And I think the moment that you think you know it all is the moment to put down the tint brush. Like, I constantly feel inspired and like to gain more from other people. And if I see someone doing something really amazing in the salon, I'll want to go over and ask them what they've done, what toner they've used. You know, that's a way to always learn, but 100% constant education. And a shameless plug is my colour masterclass.
Well, I was going to say, Warren, that would be the creative jam that everybody can get involved with face to face, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know what, the colour masterclass, I think, is a freedom of expression. You know, it has an agenda. You know, you'll see live models, you'll see trends that we've created. So it won't be these trends. It will be. It's on I think June the 28th. So I'm going to create some more trends for that, maybe some micro trends. But within this, you'll see you'll see a couple of models. There'll be demonstrations, presentations, but then obviously myself and the customers will have a bit of a creative jam, and we'll do like we'll create trends together as well, which they can take back to the salon as well for themselves. And it can be individual to their salon and where their salon's positioned, because, you know, trends have to translate no matter where you are, and you can talk about trends wherever.
Definitely. So that course, the Colour Masterclass, is at the Wella Studios, and it's a one-day course focused on trends and working creatively with colour, which is what we've been talking about today, isn't it, Warren? And that's on the 28th of June, so at the Wella Studio in London, and there are still some places available. And the course is £300 plus VAT, and you can book, call or email the studio on 0203 650 4700 or email wellastudiolondon@wella.com. But to be honest though, Warren, I guess nothing beats that kind of being face to face. And are you excited to be back in the
Oh,
studio?
I can't wait. Like literally, I think the first week in the salon was a bit intense. I'm not gonna lie. Like everyone.
I think it was the same for everyone. I'm sure
like
everyone can relate to that.
Yeah, and I'm quite a slow hairdresser. Like I'm not quick at all. So yeah, I think that for the first 2 weeks, I didn't see anyone. I didn't talk to anyone apart from my clients. But you know what? I can't wait. I'm at Wella next week doing MCP. I was at Wella last week, and you know what? To be back educating and just talking to people is great. Like I can't wait for it not to be on. This has been great. You know, it's a great way to talk, but I can't wait till we can be face to face in a room and you know have these conversations as well.
Most definitely. And for anyone who has been tuning in and has thought, oh, wow, this is opening my eyes to all these different trends that I could be experimenting with, or if you have been feeling a bit stuck in a rut, then doing a bit of a creative jam session with Warren, I'm loving that phrase, I have to say, Warren, at the Colour Masterclass at the studio on the 28th of June, that would be perfect, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be great. I'm excited.
Yeah.
So. But I think the one thing is just getting rid of the numbers. Unfortunately, you have to, the rule of 6 and all of that. But I can't wait till we're all back to normal and, you know, we can be at Salon International and all these amazing events and, you know, BHAs and, you know, just being able to all be together and have a laugh. You know, hairdressers are really fun people. And unfortunately, we all can't be together at the moment in one room.
No.
Like, so.
It feels like we're moving in the right direction, though, doesn't it, Warren? Yeah, and there's a lot of exciting trends to be getting on within the salon and encouraging clients 100%. To step out of their comfort zone.
100%.
Amazing. Well, we hope that everyone's had as much fun during this session as me and Warren have. It's been a great one, and all of the information about Warren's Colour Masterclass, if you do want to chat to him face to face, quiz him on any issues you're going through yourself in terms of colour, do check out the details in the comment section of this live session to find out how to book that. £300 plus VAT, and it's taking place on 28th of June at the Wella studio in London, and it's a one-day course, isn't it, Warren? So it's all in one day, filled with
one-day course in London, and then I think Akam will, if I don't shamelessly plug the academy, probably give me a slap. So obviously, you know, the academy, we do one-on-one sessions as well. You know, obviously we have our own formats of education as well. So feel free to, you know, give us a buzz at the academy in London, or even on Instagram, drop us a DM. And you know, we do one-on-one education. We've got our own formats as well. So feel free to come and see us in Camden as well. We'd love it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we look forward to seeing you very soon then, Warren. Thank you so much for this session.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professional Beauty, and to yourself. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very, very welcome, Warren. Speak to you very soon.
Speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye.